morning, from oral history to literary tradition. Respected Chairperson, Professor Mridula Mukherjee, Professor Subhariyalu, Professor Aditya Mukherjee, friends, Professor Shireen Musvi, friends, and let me first start by thanking Professor Aditya Mukherjee and Professor Mahalakshmi for inviting me to such a conference. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. The title of my paper is Defining the Region of Kashmir and Its Social Profile, a Case Study of the Nilmat Puran. The present paper is an attempt to construct the regional profile, both geographical and social, of Kashmir on the basis of this particular Puran. The exercise is taken at two levels. First, we try to bring out how the text, in the process of narrativization of the emergence of Kashmir, also tries to define the region as a distinct physical entity. Having constructed the physicality and its boundaries, we would then move on to discuss the social profile of the space which is demarcated as Kashmir. Our focus of the analysis in this would be to examine the spatial context of the various social, tribal, ethnic groups which are referred to in the Nilmat Puran in various contexts. What one intends to do here is to work out whether the allocation of this space to different segments was a matter of free choice or was it mediated through contestation and reconciliation. And once the choice of the settlements were settled, the kind of bearing it had on the settlement areas. The paper thus would seek to analyze how these social groups have transformed and organized the natural environment and contributed to the making of the social landscape of the region. Now, coming to the first part of the paper, which is the geographical reconstruction, the process of this in the Nilmat Puran takes place at three different levels. The first one is the recreation of a wider universal geographical imagery, and like any other Puran, the Nilmat Puran also mentions the 7 Dvipas, out of which Jambu Dvip has the 9 Varshas, last being the Bharatvarsh. We are further told that the last one is further subdivided into the 9 parts, of which the 9th alone approximate the territory of the present India. It is in this context that the Nilmat Puran informs us about the Kashmir as constituting the territory of the Bharatvarsh. The text tells us very clearly that the territory of Kashmir was initially too cold and wet to support life. And it was only that the group of Nagas, led by their chief Nil Nag, who drained the region's marshes and lakes and thus made it inhabitable. These details of the larger geography of the region and the gradual progression to a smaller one is basically an indication of how a new area of inhabitation was sought to be integrated through this particular Brahmanical text. After delineating the wider geographical context of the subcontinent, the Puran then tries to define and delineate Kashmir, and at the same time tries to situate it within those broader geographical spaces which are defined above. It is interesting to note that the way various attributes, symbols, and iconographical representations have been employed in the context of building a geographical narrative of Kashmir. These details given in the text serve to bring out the region not only as a cartographic region, but also as a region, a cultural region capable of being geographed. As far as the reconstruction of the region is concerned, nowhere does the text involve itself directly in the process of demarcating its spatial contours. Rather, it tries to create a spatial image of the region through different natural landmarks, prominent of them being mountains and then rivers, of course. If coming to the first one, that is the mountains, if suffixes are any indications, the mountains that figure prominently in the description of Kashmir are of 3 types. One is referred to as Giri, the other is Parvat, and the third is Koot. The author begins with the description of 2 Giris. One is Bahir Giri and the other is Antar Giri. Though the Nilmat Puran does not give us any locational details of these mountains, yet one can fix their location by their modern identification. These Giris possibly represent the Himalayan ranges, which are presently located in the northern side of Kashmir. Since this mountain range covers too large a space, all we can say is that it is being employed only to indicate broader northern limit. The text was possibly aware of the problems involved in stating the boundaries in such a general term, and therefore it tries to be a little more specific by referring to Koot called Haram Koot as constituting the northern boundaries. It may be mentioned that this mountain has been referred to quite frequently in the text in different contexts. The Haram Koot, which has been identified with Harmukh Peak, presently is located to the north of Kashmir. As far as the southern boundary of the region is concerned, the Nilmat Puran tells us of the existence of Ushirak Giri, which we are told was located in the territory of the Darv. The Darv, along with the Abhisaras, often referred to together as Darv Abhisar in the sense of a geographical region, has been identified by Stein as territory comprising the whole tracts of the lower and the middle hills lying between the river Vitasta, which is modern Jhelum, and river Chandrabhaga, which is present-day Chenab. Looking at the contemporary geography, therefore, Ushirak can easily be identified with the Shivalik ranges, which may be taken to constitute the southern boundary of Kashmir. The Nilmat also refers to another Giri called Bharat Giri. It is stated to have been located to the southwest of Haram Koot and possibly refers to a mountain range lying between the Sindh Valley and the eastern range of the mountains. It has also been suggested that close to the head of the Sindh Valley, this mountain range joins to the great chain of snowy mountains which stretches from Mount Naga Parvat to the southeasterly direction to the Nunkun peaks in the Suru Valley. It may be mentioned here that it is in this mountain range that we find the Zojila Pass, which connects Kashmir with Ladakh. The mountain range possibly constituted the northeastern boundary of Kashmir. Insofar as the construction of the western boundaries are concerned, the Nilmat Puran doesn't seem to be very specific on this account. However, we have reference to Indrakil and Gauri Shikhar in the context of the temple of Durga. Though it has not been possible to identify them with some certainty, yet since the temple of Durga has been identified with the present Sharda shrine, which is located in the Kishan Ganga Valley, this mountain range might have constituted the western boundaries. Thus, the boundaries of the Nilmat Puran which it constructs for Kashmir makes it a landlocked region surrounded by mountains from all sides. It is possibly this geographical image of Kashmir which makes Nilmat Puran to conceive it as a well-demarcated and impregnable territory. The territory which has thus been demarcated and referred to in the Nilmat Puran has been referred to as Desh and Mandal interchangeably. It is also important to note that apart from describing the broad geographical contours of the territory designated as Kashmir, the text also furnishes enough evidences, though scattered here and there in the text, to get an idea of the quality of the territory itself. The text tells us that the territory is capable of producing all varieties of crops. One word is shali, fruits, trees, creepers, flowers, etc. And we are further told that no famine occurs here. The term used is Adev Matrika. And that agriculture is not dependent on rain itself, is full of useful animals, is free from evil beasts, is rich in manpower, and is unassailable by other states. Now, having discussed the broader physical contours of the territory, let me now move inside the territory and see how it was socially distributed from within. We shall start our inquiry by focusing on the process of the emergence of Kashmir as a land fit for human habitation and the process through which diverse dominant groups, each having its own cultural pattern, vied with each other to appropriate the space best suited to them. It may be stated that the text does not start with the myth of the creation of the land. Rather, it begins with a very short section corresponding to a prologue to the work as a whole, followed by a series of praises in the praise of the wonders of the land. The text as a whole then begins following a verse of salutation to the gods. The narrative about the various aspects of making the land starts with the seemingly strange dialogue between sage Veshampayan and King Janamjay, in which it is stated as to why the king of Kashmir was not a part of the famous war of Bharata, even though the region of Kashmir has always been a land of worldwide importance. The structure and the format of the narratives and the references to the Bharata war at the start of the Nilmat Puran, expressed in somewhat roundabout way, is definitely not incidental. Rather, the author is trying to deliberately project Kashmir as a space, or rather a cultural space, which was by nature linked to the Madhya Desh, which was considered to be the epicenter of Brahmanical culture, thereby also implying the dominance of social groups in the spatial entity called Kashmir, which subscribed to the Brahmanical culture. And therefore, it also served to push the antiquity of the land to the period of the Bharata war. The attempt to create a hegemonistic social geography of the land is also attested by the manner in which the process of the emergence of the land itself has been described in the Nilmad Puran. It begins with the legend that there is a vast lake called Satisar, surrounded by towering snow-bound mountains. It was inhabited by a demon called Jalodbhav, which means born out of the water, and his victims, the Nagas, the inhabitants of the mountain range, appealed to the sage Kashyap for deliverance. Since the demon was invincible within the water, which was his element, the sage did great penance and was thus able to sought some kind of secure divine intervention. The mountain to the west of the lake was pierced through a plough, and water drained through this gorge. The demon, deprived of his elements, was easily slain by Vishnu. The valley that emerged from within under the water was termed as Kashmir, which means a name said to be the correct form of Kashyapur or Kashyapmar, or stretching a point further, Ka, which means water, Shimir means desiccated. Whatever the truth of these legends, it is clear that the text is making a deliberate attempt to project sage Kashyap as the leader of the colonizers of the valley. The statement to the effect that apart from making the land fit for habitation, he also established a colony of his followers is another indication of the attempt on the part of the author of the Nilmad Puran to establish the followers of Brahmanical social order as the first colonizers of the land. Parallel to this attempt to establish the spatial hegemony of the Brahmanical social groups also runs a narrative of narratives of varied length about the other inhabitants of the land. This parallel narrative gives us an idea about the ethnic profile of the region. What is important in the narrative is a strong contestation for the appropriation of space. It may be relevant to mention that all the tribal or ethnic groups referred to in the Puran were not of the same kind. Some seem to have territorialized themselves, and some were still migratory ones, as there is no reference to territories resembling their names. On the contrary, we find some tribes who are referred to by the geographical regions they inhabited. I'll just give some details, then I'll just enumerate the names. Of the tribes which are there in the Nilmad Puran, the reference to Nagas and Pishachas is of special significance. And these two seems to have been the original inhabitants of the region of Kashmir. The Puran would like us to believe that Pishachas figure as a dominant occupant of the Kashmir. But the way they have been described in the text clearly indicates that they were entirely different from the Nagas in terms of their social behavior and were definitely disliked by them. And then, in fact, they are described as friends of the Daityas who are living in the middle of the sea of the sand. And in Kashmir, they lived in the, under the leadership of a man called, a Pishach called Nikumb. And it was only as a result of Kashyap's curse on the Nagas that Pishachas were allowed to occupy the valley of Kashmir for 6 months each year. And they have been described as the eater of raw flesh. This definitely points to the level of the subsistence pattern, which was definitely diverse from the Brahmanical, the norms which are followed by the Brahmanical social order. Probably this contrasting style of subsistence pattern, they have been described in a very, very non-complimentary fashion by the author of the Nilmad Puran. I'll come to the Nagas because they seem to be the original inhabitants. They have been referred to quite frequently in the text, and in fact one gets an idea that they seem to be the first occupant of the region. The text also informs us about the many branches of the Nagas who occupied several spaces in Kashmir. I'll not go into the details, but then the clinching evidence for the Nagas being the aboriginal tribe of the region comes from the fact that they have been described as guardians of the 4 sides of Kashmir region. Now, the description of the places associated with the Nagas clearly points to the changes the tribe was undergoing with time. And the fact that they have been stated to be residing in settlements which carry suffixes like pur is a pointer to their transition to a stratified society. I'll come to the text which talks of clearly the confrontation between the Pishachas and the Nagas, and it is in this spatial contestation and social tension that the Brahmins seems to have taken advantage of to secure their own physical space within the region, and the construction of the text itself was used as a medium to secure this particular point. the closer scrutiny of some of the texts, some of the verses in the text clearly shows that the process of migration of the Brahmins had just started and they were in the process of settling down. And one of the verses narrates that when Manavas migrated to Kashmir, they were allowed to remain in the valley only for 6 months, and this process continued for a long time. It was only when one old Brahman by the name Chandradev requested Nag Neel to make them stay there for a lifetime that his request was acceded to, and the Nag Neel asked him that he can stay there and the menfolk can stay there provided they adhere to certain rituals relating to the worship of the Nagas in the territory which the Manavas were allowed to settle. And one of the practices is also the worship of the local deities along with the worship of the Brahmanical deities. Now, coming to, of course, this entire details tells us that the major stakeholders for the land which was apparently created by Rishi Kashyap were three: the Nagas, Pishachas, and the Manavas. And being the earlier occupants of Kashmir, the Nagas did not like the arrival of Pishachas or the Manavas into the valley. But if a selection was to be made between the two, they preferred the Manavas to the Pishachas. And we are told of an arrangement between the Nagas and the Pishachas, by which they would decide for themselves who would stay there for some time in the 6 months and how they would make certain arrangements to suit their settling in the region of Kashmir. Of course, the text also makes mention of many other tribes apart from these three, but of course these tribes seems to have been a part of the peripheral and the neighboring region, but they are categorically mentioned in the Nilmat Puran. I still remember verse number 82-83. The Madras, the Darvas, the Abhisaras, the Gandharas, the Jahundurs, the Shaks, the Khash, the Tanganas, the Mandavas, the Antargiri and the Bahirgari, which seem to have been a generic name for the hilly tribes inhabiting the Himalayan range known as the Greater Himalayas and the Lesser Himalayas. Now, this entire lot of data can be summarized in the following points. Number one, as far as the construct of the Kashmir as geographically defined region is concerned, the Puran no doubts refers to natural landmarks of various types. Yet it tends to make a generalistic statement, often to the point of being a little vague. This is reflected at two levels. One, when Nilmat Puran chooses to demarcate boundaries in terms of mountain ranges which are spread over too large an area to be designated as Kashmir. This is particularly true in the context of the description of the religious establishments. This seems intriguing in the light of the fact that the author of the Nilmat Puran reflects a remarkable familiarity with the geographical details of regions beyond Kashmir. And this vagueness is a reflection on the fact that the author was not yet well-versed or not as well-versed with the geography of Kashmir as he was with the geography of the regions outside it. At least the frequent imposition of the nomenclature of the places borrowed from outside the region seems to indicate this particular point. Secondly, what comes out clearly from the way the spatial entity called Kashmir has been defined in the text is that this spatial entity was by no means conceived by the author of the Nilmat Puran as a uniform one. The entire description of the region brings out clearly that this segment of space designated as Kashmir was differentiated at various levels. Third, the discussion above points out to the process through which the spatial entity called Kashmir was created and appropriated by different social and ethnic groups for settlement. The subtext of the text, not visible in its entirety always, also points to the fact that there was a conscious attempt to spatialize the social groups in a manner which would ensure the dominance of the Brahmanical social order. In this context, one would remind the creation myth through which the author of this text is deliberately attempting to put forward the fact that the former king of Kashmir and the legendary heroes of the ancient India who took part in the Bharat War were contemporaries. The description of the land as the center of Brahmanical learning and the land of the Tirthas, etc. may also be seen as an attempt to lend the Brahmanical identity to the region. Fourth, despite this conscious attempt, the text, however, informs us about the varieties of social groups who inhabited the land over a period of time. Though it is not clear who were the original inhabitants of Kashmir, the Nagas or the Pishachas, one can safely assume that they represented two different cultural groups with different patterns of subsistence, and the issue of land appropriation and permanent settlement was a contesting issue between them. It is only with the arrival of the Manavas that the issue of permanent settlement seemed to have been resolved. The region must have thrown open lucrative land for agrarian growth of the agrarian economy. Thus, the settlement of the Manavas along with the Nagas must have led to a new orientation of the social demography of the land. Though it would be too early at this juncture of our investigation to speak about the precise geographical distribution of these social groups, what one can safely assume is the fact that they largely occupied the areas which were suited for agriculture. This also implies setting in motion the process of the alteration of the face of land. The knowledge that was brought to the new land by the Brahmanas led to the opening of the agrarian areas with new settlements such as the Gram, the Nagar, the Pur, Tirthas, etc. My last concluding remark is that the relationship of the alliance between the local Nagas and the Brahmanical culture was sought to be mythified through an attempt to link the little tradition of the Kashmir Naga cult to a great tradition and to integrate the two. This represents, on the one hand, the incorporation of the indigenous elements on the part of the Brahmanical tradition, while on the other hand, it may be regarded as an attempt on the part of the indigenous elements to introduce themselves within the framework of the great tradition. Looking at this from the point of view of social geography, it also implies that the Nagas and the subscriber to the Brahmanical culture hegemonized the land, while those who were not a part of it were pushed to the regions marginal to Kashmir. And this also explains the references to the habitational groups which I quoted earlier as Antargiri and Bahirgiri.